We're seeing a wide range of reaction from 2024 GOP candidates when it comes to President Trump's latest and fourth indictment. Governor Ron DeSantis called it, quote, a criminalization of politics. Senator Tim Scott says it's, quote, un-American and unacceptable. Will Hurd, the former Texas congressman, saying, quote, this is further evidence that Trump knew he lost the 2020 election and was ready to do anything it took to cling to power. Joining us now, CNN senior political analyst and anchor John Avlon, CNN political commentator Bakari Sellers, and Maura Gillespie, who served as the deputy chief of staff to Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Maura, I want to start with you. As somebody who's deeply ingrained in kind of Republican politics and the House Republican Conference, you look at the range. Will Hurd has made very clear from the start that Trump and Trump's behavior was going to be a central issue for him. Other Republican candidates who are higher up in the polls right now, still about 30 points down, have been very different and had a different posture. The different posture that I think befuddles people to some degree, since you're running against the guy, they're clearly seeing something in the numbers, though, that says don't go down the path of criticizing him. Why?
Their campaigns have done their research, and for whatever reason, they choose to not say the truth and to not call us out for what it is. This is not normal. The man has been indicted 4 times, and he's about to release his report on Monday, further proving that he won the election. It really does call into question his sense of judgment. His character obviously is on display here as far as being indicted 4 times. But I think I was disappointed by Tim Scott's reaction. It's not surprising that the campaigns are looking for people to target the weaponization because they're going to point out things like Stacey Abrams not conceding. They're going to point out things like the Fani Willis, her not being able to question Doug Jones because of her fundraiser she had for his opponent. So they're going to call into these things to say that this is corrupt and an abuse of power because they don't want to actually address the elephant in the room, pun intended, with Donald Trump.
What do you make of Tim Scott calling it un-American? Maura is disappointed, and he's the one who said, I'm going to run a positive campaign, and he's seeing a boost in poll numbers. Why is he choosing this route?
I think Tim Scott's response is utter BS. That's first. Second, I think that Tim is actually good for the Republican Party. I think his positive vision on what the future of America should look like is actually good for the Republican Party. I disagree with Tim on some of the substance and policy. You know, Tim and I differ on the role of racism and the white supremacy in the founding of this country, et cetera. That has to be said, but I'm not sure why Tim is afraid to take that next step. And I think Tim has a lot of growth in the numbers if he does take that next step. There is a little hedging, I think, and I think that hedging is the possibility of a political future on a ticket with Donald Trump. Because I think a lot of people understand that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee. And so you can't go out there and slap the person and then want them to choose you to be the vice president. And there's a lot of Tim just wanting to run his own race and not worry about Donald Trump. The problem is that they put baby in the corner. They literally, they have to deal with the elephant that is Donald Trump. You can't run a race and not address the issue. And so, yeah, I'm disappointed in it, but I see the politics behind it. Tim is better than that answer, but here we are. Donald Trump brings people down to his level, and the problem is none of them want to rise to a new level.
Just for context, the inside joke between John and Bakari, we were talking about babies in a corner during the break. That's why they were laughing and pointing at one another. There wasn't much more to it than that.
Thank you, Phil, for that.
You're welcome. People probably watching me like, why are they laughing and pointing at each other? What happened? I want to follow up on something that Maura brought up, because since the former president tweeted about, or truth, whatever he
Truth Social.
Yes, Truth Social. Truth.
Not a verb.
Truthed. Truthed about this alleged report he's going to produce that is going to definitively prove fraud in Georgia, despite the fact that there were multiple audits, that every single vote was recounted, the fact that this has been relitigated over and over again, both in court and on the state level by Republican officials, and every single time he has been proven to lie. My question, and first, actually, I want to show this because this is important. Governor Brian Kemp, Republican from Georgia, who is a rock-ribbed conservative. Republicans who like Republican policies, like Brian Kemp, tweeted, quote, the 2020 election in Georgia was not stolen for nearly 3 years now. Anyone with evidence of fraud has failed to come forward under oath and prove anything in a court of law. Our elections in Georgia are secure, accessible, and fair, and will continue to be as long as I am governor. The future of our country is at stake in 2024. That must be our focus. This, however, is going to pull all of these candidates who have refused to say anything negative about Donald Trump down this rabbit hole of, is it fraudulent? Is this report accurate? And we have seen this over and over again in the last 7 years, where you give Trump space if you're a Republican because you don't want to upset his base. And then you find yourself in this position where they're going to have to defend a report they know is a lie or refute Trump and do the thing they've been scared of doing for the last 6 months.
Look, campaigns are about contrasts at the end of the day, even primaries. And this is what Bakari's pointing out. We all get, the mathematical issue for these candidates. They want to be able to pick up Trump supporters and donors and possibly keep some VP role open, so they're afraid to confront. But that ends up tagging you down a path where you're defining deviancy down, where you end up being complicit in a lie. And look, I look forward to the report. We all know what it's going to be, and your quote from Brian Kemp was exactly right. That's the refutation. It's court cases. It's individual states. It's audits. It's Republicans. And that needs to be said over and over again until all Donald Trump has left is a defense that he's in his own delusional world. But when candidates start unnecessarily, I think, like Tim Scott did, who is better than this, I think. I agree with Bakari on this. Says it's un-American and unacceptable. We need to just remember what's American and unacceptable is trying to overturn an election on the basis of a lie to stay in power. But
I also want to piggyback because she brought up some Republican talking points that I've been hearing a lot, and people want to compare it to Stacey Abrams, or they want to compare it to Bush v. Gore, right? Or they want to compare it to Jeff Duncan had the audacity to put John Lewis in his mouth on Twitter yesterday when John Lewis and many others wanted to push back against the 2016 election because of Russian interference and everything else. The difference is there are paths and pathways, as Jack Smith said, to contest an election in the court of law. If you think that an election was done wrong or you won the election or whatever, you can say that if you have proof or evidence, you can adjudicate those things. The difference between that and what Donald Trump did are the 170 overt acts they took that Fani Willis laid out in her indictment that show that they actually took concrete steps in a conspiracy to overthrow an election. They were breaking into facilities. It wasn't just, oh my God, I'm in my head, I believe this. They were on phone calls actually taking, it's intent meets action, which is the crime. So that is the difference between this and everything else.
And I agree. I just think that when they bring up this, weaponization of power, we can't ignore the fact that Stacey Abrams did not concede to 2018 election. We can't ignore the fact that Fani Willis had this fundraiser. So yes, it does not negate the fact that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election and he tried to, not only did he fail to concede, he also then tried to use his power to influence state officials and beyond to overturn the results of the election. It doesn't negate any of that, but to simply just brush that aside and say it's not fair or it doesn't matter, it shouldn't be
But I think that's apples and elephants.
Can I just ask you?
Yes.
What's the point of doing it in this moment?
And I completely agree that I said that I didn't. I was disappointed by. No, I'm saying I was disappointed by Tim Scott's response, but I think that's what you're going to see from.
Not you saying it more to be
clear.
No, I know.
What's
the point of them making that argument?
Because they're not going to go after Trump, which for whatever reason they're not going to go after him directly. So they go after what they see as a winning argument, It's easier to go after Democrats because they're not going to go after each other. Sure. They want to look beyond that. And what's at stake here is the integrity of our free and fair elections.
Yeah, that's what Brian Kemp, I'm so glad you read that, is standing up for it in his
as
state.
he did throughout the course of November, December, and January of 2020 and 2021. Remember, at the same time when everybody was saying in November, let Trump punch himself out. Yeah. He said, nothing's going to happen. That's right. Nothing's going to happen. He's just venting.
How'd that go for him? Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. You're coming back, right?
Yes. Allegedly.
We'll see you in a little bit.
Arkansas public schools are being told by the Department of Education in the state that a new advanced placement African American studies program, quote, may not meet graduation requirements. In a series of tweets, a spokeswoman for Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders said the new course is a pilot and, quote, not a history course. She also tweeted, quote, the department encourages the teaching of all American history and supports rigorous courses not based on opinions or indoctrination. Shortly after taking office earlier this year, Sanders signed an executive order stating that critical race theory, discrimination, and indoctrination have no place in Arkansas classrooms. We should note the New York Times is also reporting that Little Rock Central High School, which of course was an all-white school that was integrated by the Little Rock Nine in 1957, was one of the schools that had signed up for this African American Advanced Placement Studies course. The Arkansas Legislative Black Caucus expressing outrage over what the Department of Education is deciding here. In a statement, they write, this further perpetuates the marginalization of African Americans and denies all students the opportunity to learn about the unique history and experiences of our community. Bakari, John Moore back at the table. Bakari, they're saying this is pilot. we teach it, a course that covers African American history that you get credit for. This is not something to be concerned about. What do you say?
This is what structural racism looks like. And I have a fascinating theory about taking books out of schools, not teaching AP US history. And for a long period of time, I thought it was that individuals were afraid of Black young people having some level of self-empowerment and seeing the struggle, the perseverance, seeing the history that we made in this country. But I've come to realize it's a lot of white folk not wanting to recognize or deal with what white people did in this country throughout history. And I think that what Sarah Huckabee Sanders is doing is the epitome of anti-intellectualism, is fear. And I don't like having conversations about CRT because many people don't even know what it is from the beginning. And you have to start with educating the person, and you just kind of get bored, and it's a waste of time. But to be in Arkansas, where you have the history of the Little Rock Nine, and say that we're not going to teach AP African-American history is absurd. But here we are in this country having to fight these battles. And as a father of 3 Black children, one at Howard now and 2 others starting pre-K, that is what do we do when our kids leave the house? And how do we educate them? You have the fear of all these other things, but how do we educate them? And you kind of recognize that you now have to teach your kids in the home because of this fear perpetrated by many people on the right to educate your children. And I think it's a fear of recognizing what they actually did throughout history.
Yeah, I think Bakari makes such an important point about it's the importance of learning the history behind the headlines. If you don't know what happened in Little Rock High School in 1957, that's presumably part of that course.
It also feels like from an optics perspective, if you're in politics, you might want to be cognizant of that reality before you go down.
I think they're acutely aware of the optics and they feel it benefits them with the base. And I think that's part of the problem. It's politicizing history. It's politicizing books. It's turning American history into a battlefield. What we should be doing is teaching much more civics education. I'm incredibly passionate about that. Much more American history. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Embrace all of it. Understand all of it. And we can have a debate about the outer reaches, and sometimes people try to push ideological agendas. But when you start trying to pull books and pull courses, that's just about dumbing down our discourse rather than elevating it up.
But how much of this, though, is kind of a strategy, a plan, and how much of this is, you look at the number, particularly on a state and local level, of CRT-related legislation related to gender ideology, any of that type of stuff over the course of a 18-month period that just flew out into the public, bills and trying to push these issues in Republican legislatures in particular, didn't seem necessarily like this was some grand plan or strategy. They just thought there was political upside to it. Am I minimizing this? Am I not giving enough credit to some broader effort or plan here? Or is this just political points that people feel like they can score?
I do think it's political points for suburban moms, maybe, looking at that aspect of it. But my take on this is, if we don't teach and learn about our past, how can we appreciate our progress and where we've come from? Mm-hmm. We should want our children to learn critical thinking. So it's not indoctrination. I think that's really misleading, and let's put it kindly. I think having an education on all of our history, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as John said, is so important to our critical thinking skills as children and as young people. I know in college, I went to a liberal arts school where it was very, focused on the left of things, but I had to think for myself. I had to speak up, raise my hand if I had a question about something. We should want our children to do that. I think what Sarah Huckabee Sanders is doing is following DeSantis in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And I will point out that she has not made her endorsement for president yet.